The air in the penthouse office was not just cool. It was antiseptic, scented of lemon polish and implicit threat. It was the kind of silence that swallowed sounds, a vacuum where ambition went to die or be reborn in a darker image. Amara Adebayo stood in the center of this expensive silence, the weight of her father's funeral debts a physical anchor on her heart. Her crisp black blazer feeling like a costume for a role she hadn't yet read. Across the vast, polished obsidian desk, Kim Min-Jun watched her. They called him the Silent Dragon. In the Seoul underworld, which existed just a breath away from the glittering towers of legitimate business, his name was a sentence. He controlled ports, logistics, the flow of goods seen and unseen. His power was absolute. His reputation carved from ice and shadow. But the most potent rumor, the one whispered in private clubs with a mix of pity and cruel fascination, spoke of a personal flaw. A war injury, some said. A psychological scar, others murmured. The mighty Kim Min-Jun was impotent. A dragon without fire, a king without an heir, a man of immense power locked in a cage of his own flesh. Amara knew the rumors. She had researched him obsessively before this interview. She needed the job. The salary attached to the position of his personal executive secretary was astronomical, a lifeline to pull her mother and younger siblings from the brink of losing their Lagos home. She told herself the rumors were irrelevant. She was here for her mind, her fluent Korean, her top-tier business degree. She was here to be an employee, not a companion. Min-Jun finally moved, sliding a single sheet of paper across the desk. The contract. His fingers were long, elegant, but scarred across the knuckles. The terms are non-negotiable, Miss Adebayo. The salary, as you see, is triple the market rate. The duties are twofold. The public duties. You will manage my schedule, my correspondence, attend all functions with me. You will be, to the world, my constant companion. The private duty. He paused, his obsidian eyes devoid of warmth, pinning her to the spot. Is discretion. Absolute, lifelong discretion regarding all aspects of my personal life. You will see things. You will hear things. They will die with you. His voice was a low baritone, like distant thunder over a frozen lake. Amara's mouth was dry. And if I refuse the terms? A ghost of something, amusement, contempt, flickered in his eyes. You will not. Your father's medical debts, the bank's foreclosure notice on the house in Seoul. You have precisely 11 days. This is your only viable offer. He had investigated her as thoroughly as she had him. He knew her desperation. It was a calculated purchase. She picked up the pen, a heavy, cold thing of brushed steel. Felt like selling her soul. But for her family, for the memory of her father who had worked 3 jobs to put her through school, she would sell it. Resign. Amara Chidinma Adebayo. As she stood to leave, his voice halted her at the door. One more thing. Tomorrow. We're red. The Hong media dinner. The press will be there. They need to see a preference. Taste. You are to be the living, breathing proof that the rumors about me are lies. Your first public duty begins. The elevator descended 60 floors, and Amara's stomach dropped with it. She was not just a secretary. She was a prop. A human shield for a man's impotence. A beautiful, intelligent mask. The humiliation was a hot coal in her chest. What she could not know, as the city light spread below her, was that in the locked lowest drawer of Min-Jun's obsidian desk, beneath false financial reports, lay a single faded, stained photograph. It showed a younger, terrified Korean boy in a dust-choked, war-torn village, being lifted gently in the powerful arms of a Nigerian UN peacekeeper. The soldier's uniform was dirty, his smile tired but kind, the name patch clear, Adebayo. Min-Jun had been searching for that soldier for 15 years, to repay a debt of life and a chocolate bar. He had found an obituary. And then, algorithmically, he had found the soldier's daughter, drowning in debt. He had crafted the contract, telling himself it was a twisted form of repayment. A gilded cage for the songbird's protection. a solution born of guilt and a warped sense of honor. Amara wore the crimson dress. It was a slash of violence against the bland beige of the hotel ballroom, and it worked with devastating efficiency. All eyes followed her, and by extension, the imposing silent man at her side. A rival conglomerate head, a man named Park Seo-jun, whose ambitions were blocked by Min-Jun at every turn, watched with venomous curiosity. Later, as Amara sought a moment of air in a secluded balcony garden thick with orchids, Park materialized beside her. His hand, damp and possessive, closed around her bare arm. "A stunning mask for a broken man," he sneered, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "Tell me, little bird, what is your real function? To warm his bed? Or just to decorate it?" Before she could wrench away, a presence colder than the night air settled behind them. Min-Jun. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hand over Park's, and the grip was not a request. It was a promise of shattered bones. Park released her with a gasp. Min-Jun's eyes in that moment were not those of a disinterested CEO. They held a primal, terrifying glint. He had seen her touched, and something in his frozen core had cracked. The spark that ignited in Min-Jun's eyes wasn't desire. It was a deeper, more atavistic fire, territorial fury. The sight of Park's hand on Amara, the proprietary leer on his face, had bypassed the dragon's calculated coldness and struck the raw nerve of the soldier he once was. A nerve conditioned to protect what was his. He didn't raise his voice. The silence he wielded was more frightening. "She is under my protection," Min-Jun stated, each word a chip of ice falling into the quiet. "Your curiosity, Park, is a luxury you can no longer afford. Touch what is mine again, and I will trade your shipping lanes for scrap metal." The threat was delivered with such utter conviction that Park, a powerful man in his own right, paled. He muttered an excuse and slithered back into the ballroom. In the sudden, fragrant silence of the orchid garden, Amara trembled, not from Park's touch, but from the raw, unchecked energy radiating from the man beside her. She had felt it, a seismic shift. He had moved with a predator's lethal grace. He had called her his. For the contract, she told herself. For the image. But the heat in his gaze had been real. He turned to her, and as he saw the shock in her eyes, the spark died, smothered by a wave of something worse, shame. He had not protected her. He had defended his asset. He had reverted to a beast, and he saw the reflection of it in her face. The wall of ice slammed back down. "The car is waiting. Go home," he muttered, his voice flat once more, dismissing her as he turned to stare out at the city. But the dragon was unsettled. That night, in his stark, minimalist apartment that felt more like a museum than a home, sleep eluded him. He poured a drink but didn't drink it. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, but didn't see the city. He saw her in the red dress, the fear, then the dawning awareness in her eyes. And he saw, superimposed, the kind, weary face of Soldier Adebayo. He had pulled the man's daughter into his dark orbit, ostensibly to help her, but had just exposed her to a predator like Park. His guilt was a new, corrosive acid eating at his insides. His repayment was a farce. He had made her a target. Across the city, Amara paced her small, rented apartment. She replayed the moment his arm had brushed against hers as he'd positioned himself between her and Park. It had been electric, a jolt of pure, shielded power. She hated that her skin still remembered it. She hated the traitorous part of her that wanted to see that fierce, protective version of him again, rather than the cold statue. She was here for the money. She could not afford to be curious about the prison warden. The next morning, a single perfect white orchid in a slender crystal vase sat centered on her desk. No note, no explanation. It was a silent, starkly beautiful apology from a man who did not know how to form the words. Nestled beside it was a new, handwritten schedule on his personal stationery. The first item made her breath catch. Friday through Sunday, Accompany Chairman Kim to Jeju Island. Strategic retreat with investors. The Haenyeo Resort. Presidential suite. She knew of that suite. It was famous, opulent, and had only one bedroom. The presidential suite was an exercise in devastating luxury and psychological warfare. It was all soaring ceilings, windows facing the turbulent sea, and a central space dominated by a single enormous bed, a plush island of white linen that seemed to mock them both. Min-Jun entered behind her, his suitcase barely making a sound on the teak floor. He surveyed the room, his expression unreadable. Then he pointed to the bed. "You will sleep there." Before Amara could process the shock of that, he walked to the spacious seating area by the balcony, grabbed a large decorative floor cushion and a spare blanket from a linen closet. He laid them out with military precision. "I will sleep here." Amara found her voice, indignation overriding her nervousness. This arrangement was not detailed in the contract, Chairman Kim. He didn't look at her, his focus on straightening the already straight blanket. "The contract," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room, "specifies you will be seen entering my private quarters. Ensures speculation. It does not specify where, within those quarters, I choose to rest. Your comfort as my companion is part of the image. My preferences are my own business." The explanation was clinical, yet it felt like a brutal act of chivalry. He was giving her the bed, taking the hard floor, preserving a boundary that was, in its own twisted way, respectful. The first night was a symphony of quiet tension. Amara lay in the impossibly soft bed, hyper-aware of every sound. The crash of distant waves, the sigh of the wind, and the subtle pained shift of Min-Jun's body on the thin mat. A low, stifled groan escaped him, a remnant, she guessed, of the old war injury that was the source of the rumors. The sound tugged at something in her, a compassion she fiercely tried to suppress. He was her employer, her jailer, not a patient. After a long hour, she sat up, her voice cutting through the dark. "The bed is easily large enough for two, Chairman Kim. We could build a wall of pillows. For propriety." The offer hung in the air, bold and foolish. The silence that followed was profound. When he spoke, his voice was strained, stripped of its usual cool control. "No," the word was final. Then softer almost to himself. "The temptation to forget my condition, to pretend to be a normal man for a night, is a weakness. And weakness is a luxury I cannot afford. Go to sleep, Miss Adebayo." He had not just rejected her offer. He had admitted, for the first time, a vulnerability. The dragon had shown her a single, fragile chink in his armored scales. And in doing so, he had made himself impossibly, dangerously human. The second night brought a storm. It roared in from the sea, swallowing the resort in howling wind and lashing rain. The power failed, plunging the suite into an absolute, suffocating black. Amara sat up, disoriented. Then she heard it. A crash, a ragged, guttural cry that was pure anguish. It was Min-Jun. She scrambled out of bed, feeling her way toward the sound. She found him on the floor, thrashing, trapped in a nightmare. "Don't, the wire, don't step," he gasped in Korean, his voice that of a terrified boy. He was back in the war. Without thinking, she knelt and reached for him. "Chairman Kim. It's a dream." Her hand found his shoulder. He flinched violently. Then his own hand shot out in the dark, finding her wrist in a grip of iron. Not to hurt but to cling. To anchor himself to the present. To her. His breathing was frantic. "Don't," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Don't let them see me like this." In that raw, shattered moment, the CEO was gone. The dragon was gone. All that was left was the boy from the photograph, scared and alone in the rubble. And Amara, her own fear forgotten, knew she was witnessing a secret more intimate than any physical act. She did not pull away from his desperate grip. In the howling dark, with the storm as their witness, she became an anchor. She spoke softly, first in English, Then in the Yoruba lullaby her father used to sing when she was sick. Died kang kantiayan lo. Hush, it's nothing. You're safe. It is only the storm. She repeated the words, a gentle rhythmic chant against the chaos. Slowly, incrementally, the iron tension in his fingers began to loosen. His breathing eased from a panicked rasp to something deeper, more controlled. When the emergency generators finally kicked in, casting the room in a dim, amber glow, they were frozen in a tableau. She was on her knees beside him, his hand still wrapped around her wrist, their faces close enough for her to see the sheen of cold sweat on his brow, the utter vulnerability in his unguarded eyes. He looked at their joined hands as if seeing a foreign object, then released her as if her skin were white-hot. He scrambled back, the shutters slamming down over his expression, but it was too late. She had seen. "Forgive me," he bit out, the words clearly foreign and painful on his tongue. He stood, turning his back to her, retreating to his mat as if it were a bunker. The air between them was irrevocably changed. The next morning, they sat on the balcony overlooking the storm-cleaned sea, a silent breakfast between them. Amara waited. She had learned he spoke only when he had decided to. Finally, he put down his coffee cup, its click against the saucer deliberate. He stared at the horizon, not at her. "There is a context," he began, his voice gravelly. "A debt. I have spent years searching for a man. A Nigerian peacekeeper who pulled me from a collapsed building when I was a child. He gave me his last ration, a chocolate bar. He saved my life, then vanished back into the chaos." He paused, and Amara's heart began a slow, heavy thud. "I found him. Or rather, I found his obituary. Lieutenant Chijioke Adebayo." The world tilted. The air left Amara's lungs. Her father. Her brave, laughing, selfless father. Min-Jun continued, merciless in his confession. "The algorithm then showed me his daughter. Top of her class, buried in medical debt from his sudden illness, facing the loss of her family home. I created the position. I tailored the contract. I told myself it was repayment. A secure, lucrative cage for the songbird, to honor the soldier." Now he turned his head, and his eyes held a bleak self-loathing that stunned her. "I was a fool. My world is not secure. It is poison. Last night with Park proved it. I drew a target on you with my twisted gratitude." He took a deep breath, the most decisive she had ever seen him. "Therefore the contract is terminated. Effective at the end of this quarter. You will receive the full 3-year salary as severance. The non-disclosure agreement remains, for your safety as much as mine. But you will be free. The debt is cancelled." He was firing her, setting her free, granting her every financial wish. And it felt like a sentence to exile. It felt like being pushed off a cliff after just learning the shape of the ground beneath her feet. The betrayal was so vast, so layered. He had known her father. He had manipulated her because of it. But the regret in his eyes was so profound it disarmed her rage before it could ignite. Before she could form a single word in response, anger, gratitude, confusion, the suite door was thrown open without ceremony. Min-Jun's head of security, a man named Jay, stood there, his face a mask of urgency. "Sir. Park. He's here at the resort. He knows you're in the suite with her. He's not alone. He has a blogger, one who trades in rumors, with a camera. They're in the lobby, telling anyone who will listen that you've brought your secretary here for a private cure." Min-Jun's face transformed instantly from conflicted man back to dragon, his expression hardening into something terrifyingly calm. He looked from Jay to Amara, a ruthless calculation flashing in his eyes. "Then we give them a show," he declared, his voice dropping to a deadly murmur. "A performance so convincing, it will burn the speculation to the ground. Get ready, Miss Adebayo. Your most important act begins now." The show was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Min-Jun became a different man in public, or rather, he amplified a shadow of a possibility. On the beach walk, his hand wasn't just holding hers. It was laced with hers, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a possessive rhythm. He leaned in close, his lips near her ear, but the words were not romantic. Smile, but let it not reach your eyes. Look up at me as if I fascinate you. Your posture should suggest intimacy, not fatigue. He played the role of a man utterly captivated, brushing a non-existent strand of hair from her cheek, his gaze lingering on her lips with a heat that felt shockingly real. Amara, her heart a trapped bird, followed his lead. She was an actress on the world's most dangerous stage. She laughed at appropriate moments, rested her head briefly on his shoulder, looked at him with what she hoped was a convincing mix of admiration and affection. Inside she was fracturing. This was the cruelest twist yet, performing a passionate connection for a hungry audience, while knowing the devastating private truth of his isolation. She was lying for him with him, and the lie was etching itself onto her soul. That evening in the suite, the tension didn't dissipate. It condensed. The performance had to continue indoors, for any potential long-lens cameras. Min-Jun, in a move of sheer, reckless theater, pulled her into the center of the room, near the vast glass doors that offered a silhouette to the night. They may still be watching, he murmured, his voice a vibration against her temple. His arms went around her, holding her in a slow dance to no music. His body was a tense line of heat against hers. She could feel the controlled strength in him, the rapid beat of his heart against her own. And then he did it. He bent his head, his lips hovering over the sensitive skin where her neck met her shoulder. Makis, a staged caress for an invisible audience. His breath was warm, his scent of sandalwood and salt air enveloping her. Amara's entire body stiffened, then traitorously melted. A small, unbidden sigh escaped her, a purely physical, involuntary reaction to the proximity, the warmth, the devastating illusion of being wanted. He froze, absolutely still. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. There was no camera here, no audience in this intimate space between their bodies. Just the echo of her sigh hanging in the air. The charade had cracked, revealing a raw, dangerous truth beneath. His voice, when it came, was stripped bare, ragged with an emotion she couldn't name. "Did you?" he began, then stopped, his jaw tight. He tried again, the question a landmine. "Did you enjoy that?" The humiliation was instant and scalding. He was asking if she had enjoyed his performance, his clinical manipulation of her senses. It reduced her traitorous body's response to a review of his acting skills. Anger, hot and clean, washed through her, burning away the confusion. She would not lie. Not here. Not about this. She met his gaze, her own eyes flashing. Yes. The word was simple, honest, devastating. It hung between them, a confession more profound than any of his. His expression didn't show triumph or contempt. Shattered. It was a window into a storm of shame, longing, and despair. He looked at her as if she had just handed him a diagnosis of a terminal illness he already knew he had. Without another word, he turned and walked out onto the balcony, leaving the glass door open. The cold sea wind whipped into the room. He stood at the railing, his back rigid, a solitary figure being swallowed by the vast, dark ocean. He left her standing alone in the center of the lavish suite, her skin still humming from the ghost of his touch, the word yes echoing in the silent, empty space he had vacated. The distance the next day was absolute. A Siberian tundra settled between them. Min-Jun was colder, more robotic, more Chairman Kim than he had ever been. He communicated through terse emails, even when she was in the same room. The humanity from the storm, the vulnerability from the balcony, all were locked away in a vault she had no code for. Hurt and defiant, Amara channeled her energy into work. He had a complex merger proposal he'd been neglecting, a deal with a European firm. She took it over, determined to prove her worth was in her mind, not in this painful charade. Late one evening, long after he'd left, She was searching his office for a specific financial report in the physical archives. In a locked but poorly secured lateral filing cabinet, a relic he never used, her fingers brushed against a thick, rolled parchment. Curiosity overrode protocol. She pulled it out. It was an architectural blueprint. The heading: Adebayo Legacy Rehabilitation Center, Lagos, Nigeria. Proposed director: Amara C. Adebayo. The funding sources were listed as an anonymous trust. The date on the plans was from 3 months before she had even applied for the job. Her breath stopped. He had planned this future for her. This real, tangible legacy, from the very beginning. Was this his guilt? His redemption? Or something else entirely? As her mind reeled, the soft click of the office door opening made her heart leap into her throat. It wasn't Min-Jun. Park Seo-jun stood there, a smile of pure venom on his face. 2 large men flanked him. Working late, little bird. How dedicated, Park purred. The dragon is losing his touch, leaving his precious mask unguarded. You see, I don't believe his performance. And I think you're the key to making him show his true, broken face. One of the men stepped forward, a syringe glinting in his hand. Amara had nowhere to run. The drug in the syringe was fast-acting and potent. Amara's last conscious sensation was the cold bite of the needle in her neck. Her last sight the triumphant gleam in Park's eyes, and her last thought a frantic wordless cry not for help, but a name, Min-Jun. She woke to the smell of damp concrete, rust and salt water. Her head throbbed, her mouth was cotton dry. She was in a chair, her wrists bound tightly behind her back. The room was a decaying warehouse, light filtering through grimy high windows, illuminating floating dust motes. Park stood before her, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had finally cornered his prey. Awake. Good, he said, his tone conversational. We don't have much time. The dragon's security net is extensive, but even a dragon has a blind spot. His treasure. He leaned closer. He will come for you. Not because he loves you, he is incapable of that, but because you are his possession. His proof of manhood. And when he comes, he will come alone to negotiate. He will trade anything for his fragile pride. Specifically, the digital keys to his eastern shipping lanes. And I will have them. Amara spat, the action weak but defiant. He won't come. I'm just an employee. Park laughed, a dry, cracking sound. You wear his scent of guilt and confusion like perfume, girl. I saw it on Jeju. The way he looked at you after his little display. There is a thread there. And I will pull it until his entire empire unravels. He motioned to a thug who handed Amara a phone. Call him. Sound scared. Or. He held up another phone, showing a live feed of a familiar house in Lagos, her mother's house. Your family's safety becomes unpredictable. Terror, cold and absolute, flooded her veins. She took the phone. Rang once, twice. He picked up. Yes. His voice was its usual controlled baritone. Just that one word gave her a sliver of strength. Min-Jun, she said, forcing a tremor into her voice that wasn't entirely fake. It's Park. Thole Docks. Warehouse 7. He wants the. A hand clamped over her mouth and the line went dead. She prayed he heard the fear. She prayed, more fervently, that he was as cold and calculating as the world believed, and that he would not walk into the obvious trap. But in his penthouse, Min-Jun stared at the disconnected phone in his hand. He had heard the dock sounds, the fear in her voice, the muffled cutoff. The blueprint for the Lagos Center was still on his desk, where he'd been staring at it for hours. The face of Soldier Adebayo swam before his eyes. Then Amara's face, saying yes on Jeju. The spark in the orchid garden. The boy in the storm clinging to her wrist. He was not a man who acted on emotion. He was a strategist. Yet, in that moment strategy evaporated. A single primal directive took over: retrieve. Protect. A debt was not a spreadsheet. It was a life. Or life. He picked up another phone. Mobilize the black team. Silent protocol. Old docks. Warehouse 7. Hostage retrieval. Primary asset. Miss Adebayo. Secondary objective. Permanent resolution of the park problem. He paused, his knuckles white around the phone. I am going in first. Lone. You have the roof. No one touches her. Do you understand? No one. Hours later, the massive rusted door of Warehouse 7 screeched open on protesting hinges. Min-Jun stood framed in the gray afternoon light, alone. He wore a simple black coat, and in his hand was a single silver briefcase. He looked like a businessman arriving for a meeting. His eyes scanned the shadowy interior, finding Amara first, checking for visible harm. Then they settled on Park. Let her go, he said, his voice calm, carrying in the cavernous space. You have my attention. Now release what is mine. Park grinned, stepping forward. First, proof of your genuine attachment. Kiss. Real one. For my camera here. He pointed to a phone on a tripod, its red recording light glowing. Let the world see the dragon's passion. Then we talk business. The demand was a masterpiece of cruelty, targeting Min-Jun's deepest shame. Amara watched, her heart breaking for him. He would never do it. He couldn't. Min-Jun's gaze flicked to her, a world of apology and conflict in that glance. Then he took a slow, deliberate step forward. The walk to her felt like a march to the gallows. Every step Min-Jun took echoed in the hollow warehouse, a drumbeat of doom. He stopped before her, his expression unreadable. He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing away a tear track she hadn't known was there. His touch was not that of a lover, but of a man memorizing a relic. He leaned close, his lips near her ear. His whisper was so faint, only she could catch it. Close your eyes, Amara. Trust me. She did. She surrendered, shutting out the grim scene, focusing only on the feel of his hands on her skin. He leaned in further. She braced for the humiliation, the violation of his deepest boundary for both their sakes. His lips did not meet hers. They brushed, featherlight, against her forehead. It was a kiss of benediction. A profound, aching reverence. A knight's kiss to a lady's hand. It was a gesture so chaste, so loaded with unspoken emotion, that it was infinitely more powerful than any passionate, fake kiss could ever have been. Said, you are sacred. I will not defile this, even to save us. He straightened, his eyes now blazing as he turned to Park. That, Min-Jun stated, his voice ringing with finality, is all you get. That is real. Go. Park's face contorted with fury. The symbolic defeat was worse than a refusal. Min-Jun had redefined the terms, asserting a control far deeper than physicality. The deal has changed. Park snarled, signaling his men. They untied Amara's wrists but grabbed her arms, yanking her to her feet. The shipping lane codes. And you take her place. A life for a life, dragon. Your father figure saved you. You save his daughter by becoming my prisoner. Poetic, no. As they began dragging Amara toward a side door, she struggled, her eyes locked on Min-Jun. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Not to Park. Not to her. To the shadows high in the steel rafters. A pinpoint of red laser light appeared, dancing on Park's forehead. Park's triumphant smile died. He looked up, his eyes widening. Min-Jun's voice was now the crack of a whip. I did not come to negotiate, Park. I came to erase you. Chaos, silent and efficient, descended. Suppressed thwips of sound. Park's men crumpled. Jay and 2 others rappelled down from the rafters. Park, in a last desperate move, saw Amara pulled toward the door, momentarily out of Min-Jun's direct line of sight. He pulled a knife from his coat and lunged, not at Min-Jun, but at the retreating Amara, aiming for her back. If I can't have it, no one will. Min-Jun moved. He didn't shout. He became a blur of motion, throwing himself in the path of the lunge. The knife, meant for Amara's kidney, sliced a deep, ragged line across his forearm instead. He barely flinched. With his uninjured arm, he delivered a brutal, disarming strike, followed by a takedown that left Park unconscious on the concrete. The whole fight lasted 3 seconds. As his team secured the scene, Min-Jun slumped against a support pillar, clutching his bleeding arm. His face was pale, but his eyes sought Amara, who was now free and running toward him. "Amara," he breathed, his voice losing strength. "The debt to your father. Is it finally paid?" He was asking if nearly dying for her balanced the scales of his manipulation. Before she could answer, his eyes rolled back and his legs gave way. Jay caught him as he fell. The dragon was down. The hospital room was a sterile white cocoon. Min-Jun floated in and out of a morphine-hazed consciousness. Each time he surfaced, she was there. Amara, in a chair by his bed, her face etched with worry, her hand often resting on the bed rail near his. She had not left. Not for a moment. When he finally woke properly, his mind clear, the first thing he saw was her, asleep in the chair, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. Morning light gilded her profile. The sight struck him with a force greater than the knife. She was here. Not out of duty. No contract compelled this. He moved slightly, and her eyes fluttered open. She was immediately alert, leaning forward. "You're awake. Don't try to move. The doctor said the blade missed major arteries, but you lost a lot of blood." He stared at her, his voice rough from disuse. "Why are you here?" Her answer was simple, direct. "Where else would I be?" He looked away out the window. "The debt." "Stop," she said, her voice firm. She waited until his eyes met hers again. "The debt is gone. You bled it out on that warehouse floor. It's over." She took a steadying breath. "But this," she gestured between the bed and her chair, "is not about a debt. You left me in that suite on Jeju, half naked in my own emotions, after asking me that question. You walked away from my answer. You don't get to do that again. We're going to talk about the yes. But not until you're well." He was stunned into silence. She was not the captive secretary, the prop, the grateful beneficiary. She was a force, dictating terms, demanding accountability. And he, the dragon, had no defense against it. The walls around his heart didn't just crack, they developed a fault line. Recovery was a slow unveiling. Min-Jun, for the first time in his adult life, was not in control. Amara managed his empire from his hospital room, her intelligence and instinct shining. He watched her handle a hostile board member on a video call with a blend of grace and steel that left him in awe. One afternoon, weak but clear-headed, he broached the unspoken. "The blueprint. You found it in the office." "Yes," she said, not looking up from her tablet. "It was never a secret," he said quietly. "It was a hope. That even if you grew to hate me for the manipulation, you would have a future. Good one. Built by your own hands, funded by my remorse." He paused, gathering courage. "The question I asked you, my walking away. It was not because of your answer, Amara. It was because of mine." Her fingers stilled on the tablet. She looked at him. "I could not bear," he confessed, the words scraped from a deep, wounded place, "that you might feel something for a shadow, for a man who is not a whole. Your yes was a mirror, and I could not face what I saw reflected, my own longing and my inability to fulfill it." It was the most vulnerable sentence he had ever uttered. Amara put the tablet down, moved to his bedside, and took his uninjured hand. Her touch was warm, sure. "You are not defined by one part of you," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "You are defined by this. By your honor in a storm. By your sacrifice in a warehouse. By the future you drew for a woman you thought you'd wronged. That is who you are, Min-Jun. The rest is just history." A single, unguarded tear escaped his eye, tracing a path down his temple. He did not wipe it away. He let her see it. The fortress gate was not just open, It had been dismantled, brick, by her words. His apartment was different when they returned. It was no longer a museum. It was a convalescent space, and then, slowly, a shared one. The guest room became Amara's room, but the doors remained open. Their new contract was unspoken, written in quiet moments. In the shared silence on the large sofa, her feet tucked under her, him reading reports. In her head finding its way to his good shoulder during a movie. In his fingers, hesitantly at first, then with more certainty, tracing the lines of her palm. The physical intimacy was a slow, tender cartography of everything but the act he feared. They were relearning touch as a language of comfort, not performance or demand. He learned the melody of her laughter, the little hum she made when concentrating, the scent of shea butter in her hair. She learned the weight of his head in her lap, the peace that smoothed his brow when he finally slept, the way his hand would seek hers in the dark, not for passion but for presence. One evening, she was helping him with the physiotherapy for his injured arm, massaging the tight, scarred tissue. He was shirtless, the bandages gone, the angry red line of the knife scar a stark testament. Her touch was clinical at first, working the muscles. Then it softened, becoming soothing, restorative. Under her hands, she felt a great, shuddering wave of tension release from his body. A deep, fractured sigh escaped him. And then a sound she had never heard, a soft, broken sob. He turned, burying his face against her abdomen, his arms circling her waist, holding on as if she were the only solid thing in a universe that had always been shifting sand. He was not the dragon. He was Min-Jun. And he was weeping for the boy in the rubble, for the years in the frozen cage, for the sheer, terrifying relief of being seen and not rejected. She held him, her hands in his hair, whispering words of comfort in Yoruba, letting the storm pass. When it was over, he didn't let go for a long time. The warmth between them was no longer from a fireplace or a blanket. It was generated from within, a shared hearth they had built together. Later that night, in the darkness of his bedroom, they now shared the bed, with no pillow wall, sleeping curled back to back or facing each other. He spoke into the quiet. The doctors, after the initial injury, they said the physical damage was minimal. The real barrier was here. He took her hand and placed it flat on his chest, over his steadily beating heart. A trauma block. The mind protecting the body, or the body manifesting the mind's prison. This, he pressed her hand closer, works. For you it beats, feels. But the connection, the command from here to there, he gestured vaguely, is still lost. A prisoner in a cell who can see the key but cannot reach it. Amara turned to face him, her eyes gleaming in the low light. She didn't offer pity. She offered a pact. Then we find a different way into the cell, she said, her voice unwavering. We don't give up on the key. We try every door, every window. Together. Amara became a researcher, a discreet strategist. She connected with world-renowned specialists in trauma and somatic therapy, framing it not as fixing him, but as a project for his overall well-being, a journey they would undertake as partners. He was resistant, prideful, afraid of hope. But her persistence was a gentle, relentless tide against his cliffs of shame. Meanwhile, their public life transformed. The business world buzzed. The silent dragon was different, softer around the edges. He was seen genuinely smiling in photos, his gaze often on his Nigerian secretary-turned-partner. The Adebayo Legacy Rehabilitation Center project in Lagos was officially announced at a glittering press conference, with Amara as the visionary director. Their partnership was the stuff of legend, the ruthless dragon and the brilliant phoenix, building something good from their ashes. At that very press conference, a tabloid reporter smelling blood asked the question on everyone's mind. Chairman Kim, Miss Adebayo, your partnership is clearly close. Can we expect a merger of a more personal nature? Are there wedding bells in the future? Min-Jun went rigid, the old shadow passing over his face. But Amara, smooth as silk, leaned into the microphone with a gracious smile. Chairman Kim and I are building futures, brick by brick. Some of those buildings are clinics in Lagos. Some, she said, casting a warm sidelong glance at him that took his breath away, are very private foundations. We'll let you know when we have a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The crowd laughed, charmed. The moment passed. But in the limousine afterward, the unspoken future hung between them, a beautiful, terrifying possibility. A week later, a plain cardboard package, postmarked from a non-existent address, arrived at Min-Jun's private mailbox. Inside, nestled in shredded paper, was the framed photograph of Soldier Adebayo. The glass was shattered, a web of cracks obscuring the soldier's kind face. A single note typed lay beneath. A debt paid with your blood is one thing. A debt paid with your heart is another. I am watching Dragon. And I take what is loved. It was signed with a crude drawing of a coiled serpent, Park's known insignia. He was alive. He had survived the warehouse. And he hadn't been idle. He had dug, he had watched, and he had discovered the truth Min-Jun guarded most fiercely. His heart was no longer his own. He had a vulnerability now, and Park knew its name. The threat moved them from a Cold War to a state of active siege. Security was doubled, then tripled. Paranoia, Min-Jun's old familiar companion, returned with a vengeance, threatening to swallow the man he'd become. He wanted to send her away to Lagos, to the safety of the center's construction site, guarded by an army. Amara refused. Absolutely. If we are partners in business in life, then we face threats as partners. You do not get to ship me off to safety like fragile cargo. You are not alone in this fight anymore, Min-Jun. Let me stand with you. Their first real, shouting argument echoed through the apartment. Her fiery Nigerian resilience, all passion and principle, clashed with his stoic Korean protectiveness, honed by a lifetime of solitary warfare. You are the target because of me, he roared, a rare loss of control. And you are in danger because you chose to protect me, she fired back. That was your choice. Now let me make mine. To stay. It ended not with a resolution, but with a collision. A surge of fear, love, frustration, and years of pent-up longing broke the final dam within him. He crossed the room, pulled her to him, and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was desperate, searing, a claiming and a surrender all at once. And for a glorious, electric moment, as her hands fisted in his shirt and she kissed him back with equal fervor, his body responded. A shocking, undeniable flare of life and need, long thought extinct, ignited against her. A miracle. Then, as suddenly as it came, it vanished. The connection severed. He broke the kiss, stumbling back, a look of utter shock and then crushing, devastating defeat on his face. The psychological wall had not just slammed down. It had fallen on him, burying the spark. He looked at her, his eyes hollow with despair. See, he rasped, the word torn from him. A fleeting echo. A cruel, physiological trick. I am broken, Amara. Truly broken. He turned, a man in full retreat, heading for the door, for the isolation of his study. But her voice, not pleading but commanding, a general's voice, stopped him cold. Kim Min-Jun. He froze. She walked to him, her own eyes blazing with tears of frustration, not pity. That was not a trick. That was a key turning in a lock you've let rust shut for a decade. We do not stop trying because a door is stiff. We oil the hinges. We try again. And again. The siege is not just out there from Park, she said, jabbing a finger toward the window. It is in here. She pressed her fist against his chest, over his heart. And I am not surrendering to it. And I will not let you surrender either. Do you understand me? She stood before him, not as a secretary, not as a victim, but as his equal, his challenger, his hope. The dragon, faced with this unwavering force, found he had no more walls high enough. The breakthrough, when it came, was not in a grand, orchestrated moment. It was in the quiet, patient work that followed. With the guidance of a discreet specialist they both trusted, they worked not on performance, but on connection. On dismantling the neural pathways that linked intimacy with trauma, failure and shame. It was a journey of trust, of non-demanding touch, of rewriting the story his body had been told. Weeks passed under the oppressive shadow of Park's threat, but inside their home, a different, more important battle was being slowly, tenderly won. Then, one rainy Seoul night, with the city's neon glow painting their bedroom in soft blues and reds, it happened. Not as a goal achieved, but as a natural, inevitable culmination. There was no pressure, no expectation of a specific outcome. Just Min-Jun and Amara, fully present, heart, mind and soul in alignment. And this time the connection held. The door did not just open. It swung wide on well-oiled hinges. It was a rediscovery, a homecoming to a place he thought was lost forever. Afterward he held her, his entire body shaking not with regret, but with a profound releasing awe, as if witnessing a resurrection. His own. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The dragon was not just whole. He was finally, truly free. In the peaceful, early morning light, they lay entwined, a tangle of limbs and quiet joy. The storm outside had passed, and the silence between them was rich and full. Min-Jun traced the line of her spine, still seeming to marvel at his own ability to do so, to feel the response it elicited in him and in her. Amara's phone, charging on the nightstand, buzzed with a specific, urgent tone, the security alert for the Lagos Center. She reached for it, a frown forming. The alert was a breach notification. Attached was a live feed video file, accessed from a hacked security camera. She sat up, opening it. The feed showed the unfinished lobby of the rehabilitation center, scaffolding and drop cloths visible in the grainy light. A figure stood in the middle, holding a gasoline can. Park Seo-jun. He looked directly into the camera lens, his face a mask of feral hatred. "A life for a life, dragon." His voice crackled through the phone's speaker. "Your savior pulled you from rubble. I will burn his daughter's dream to the ground. A fitting end, don't you think? Come and stop me. Bring her. I want her to watch it burn." He kicked over the can, the liquid glugging out, and held up a lighter. The feed went dead. The new piece of moments before shattered. This was no longer a corporate rivalry or a personal grudge. It was a direct attack on the legacy they were building, on the future, on the very symbol of their redemption. Min-Jun was already out of bed, pulling on clothes. His face the calm mask of the dragon, but his eyes held a new, focused fire. He wants a final battle. He will have it, but not on his terms. He looked at Amara, who was already dressing, her expression set in determined lines. "You are not staying here." "No," she agreed, pulling on her boots. "I'm not. He threatened my home, my father's legacy. This battle is mine as much as yours. We finish this together." In Lagos. 24 hours later, they stood on the sun-baked construction site of the Adebayo Legacy Center. It was high noon, the African sun a brutal, honest orb. They had not come with an army, but with a plan and a small elite team. They found Park not hiding, but waiting in the shade of the unfinished structure, the smell of gasoline strong in the hot air. He held a remote detonator. "Sentimental," Park sneered, looking at the building. "You build clinics while I burn them. Which of us is stronger, dragon?" Min-Jun said nothing, letting Amara step forward. She was in her element here, on Nigerian soil, defending her father's name. She spoke, her voice clear and carrying. But as she laid out their final offer, walk away and live in obscurity or be erased, Park's eyes grew wild. He wasn't listening. He was staring past them to the perimeter fence. A black van had just pulled up, unseen by their team. The side door slid open. Park grinned, a true madman's grin. "You brought your heart, dragon. I brought insurance." The men who emerged from the van were not Korean. They were hired local muscle, armed and surrounding the site. Park raised the detonator. "The clinic burns. You watch. Then we see if your love can survive bullets." The standoff was over. The trap was sprung. They were surrounded, outgunned, and Park's finger was hovering over the button. In that blistering moment, under the Lagos sun, strategy evaporated. It was down to raw truth. Min-Jun did not look at the armed men. He looked at Park. And he did something he had never done before. He surrendered his title. "Park," he said, his voice calm, devoid of its usual command. It was just a man speaking to another man. "You win. You have always been obsessed with what you thought I lacked. You wanted to see me broken. Look." He took Amara's hand, not in a gesture of possession, but of union. "I am broken. She is broken. We all are. The difference is, she and I are using our broken pieces to build something. You are using yours to destroy. That is not strength. It is the deepest poverty." He took a step forward, putting himself slightly in front of Amara, a human shield not just for her body, but for the dream behind them. "The shipping lanes are yours. The European merger. Take it all. It's paper. It's money. This," he nodded to the half-built center, "is a legacy. This is a man's life, a father's love, a daughter's hope. You cannot burn that, Park. Even if you light the match, it is already built in here." He touched his chest, then Amara's. "And in here." Park's hand wavered. The grand, dramatic revenge was being met not with defiant rage, but with humble, disarming truth. Min-Jun was giving him everything he'd ever wanted financially, and showing him how utterly worthless it was. Amara spoke then in Yoruba, her voice the sound of the land itself. "IWAN. Character is religion. My father taught me that. What is your character, Park Seo-jun? Will you be the man who killed for money? Or will you be the man who walked away and let a hospital be built? The choice is yours. But choose knowing that if you kill us, you will not be a mighty destroyer. You will be a small man who murdered hope. And the world will forget you." The hired local men, overhearing the translation from one of their own, shifted uncomfortably. They were thugs, not ideologues. They had been paid to intimidate, not to murder people building a hospital for their own community. Park looked from Min-Jun's peaceful, resigned face to Amara's blazing, defiant one. He looked at the detonator, then at the gasoline-soaked ground. The emptiness of his victory yawned before him. He had wanted to break the dragon, but the dragon had already been broken and remade into something else, something Park could never touch or understand. With a scream of pure frustration that was his final true defeat, he threw the detonator into the dirt and turned, pushing past his own confused men, walking away into the heat haze without a backward glance. The armed men, leaderless and morally adrift, lowered their weapons and drifted away after him. Silence descended, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Amara's knees buckled, the adrenaline draining. Min-Jun caught her, holding her up, his own body trembling with release. They stood, holding each other in the shadow of the building that had almost been a pyre, now just a building again, a future. 1 year later, the Adebayo Kim Rehabilitation Center opened its doors in a grand ceremony. Amara, radiant in a fusion of Osso oak and Korean silk, cut the ribbon as the director. Min-Jun stood beside her, his smile genuine and relaxed, his arm around her waist. The rumors of the impotent Mafia boss were a forgotten, laughable myth. The world now saw a power couple of a different kind. Healers, builders, partners. That night, in their private quarters on the center's grounds, Min-Jun gave her a final gift. Not jewelry. A deed to the lush, adjacent plot of land. "To build a home," he said. "Right here. With you. Where your father's legacy lives, and ours begins." As they embraced, looking out at the lit-up, thriving center, Amara's assistant, a young Nigerian woman, rushed in, her face pale. "Director. Chairman Kim. Problem. The scheduled delivery of specialized pediatric equipment from Switzerland. The shipping container was intercepted at the port. It wasn't stolen. It was swapped." She handed Amara a tablet. The live security feed from the port showed the opened container. It didn't hold medical equipment. It was filled with white, pristine teddy bears. Each one had its chest slit open, stuffed not with cotton, but with shredded photos of Amara and Min-Jun from their wedding. In the center of the pile was a single, old-fashioned baby rattle. A note was tied to it, visible on the high-resolution feed. "Congratulations on your union. The dragon's heir will not inherit a legacy of peace. The debt of blood passes to the next generation. We are patient." The screen flickered. It was signed with a new symbol, a serpent coiled around a cradle. The discovery in the shipping container was a psychological attack of a different, more insidious magnitude. It wasn't a direct threat against them, but against a possibility. A future they had only just begun to whisper about in the dark. Min-Jun's transformation was instant and total. The calm, healed man vanished, replaced by a protector of prehistoric intensity. Every resource was diverted to investigation. The trail was ghostly, leading back to a splinter faction of Park's old network, one they thought had been dissolved, now radicalized and led by Park's vengeful younger brother, who saw the unborn heir as the ultimate symbol of the dragon's triumph. Amara, however, reacted differently. The initial terror morphed into a fierce, maternal defiance. "They want to use hope as a weapon," she told Min-Jun, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. The pregnancy was so new, only they and her doctor knew. "We will not let them. We will have this child here, in this center of healing. And he or she will be surrounded by more love and protection than any shadow can penetrate." The two approaches clashed. His instinct to encase her in a fortress of solitude, hers to live openly and defiantly. It was their greatest test as a couple. In the end, they found a middle path. Unprecedented, visible security paired with an utterly uncompromising continuation of their lives. Amara led the center's opening of a new pediatric wing. Min-Jun, by her side, announced a massive charitable foundation in Soldier Adebayo's name. They were a united front, shining a light so bright the shadows had nowhere to hide. The pregnancy progressed, a secret joy they guarded fiercely. The threat, while ever present, began to feel like background noise against the drumbeat of the life they were building. They started designing the house on the adjacent plot, a fusion of traditional Nigerian courtyards and clean Korean lines. True home. At the 7-month mark, during a routine scan at the center's new medical wing, the sonographer paused, her brow furrowed. "The baby is perfect," she said quickly, seeing their alarm. "Strong heartbeat, excellent growth. But there's something else." She pointed to the screen, to a shadowy, curved outline near the baby's back. "It's probably nothing, a benign cyst, a fold. But given your history, I'd like a specialist from Seoul to look at the images. Just to be absolutely sure." The words, "probably nothing," did nothing to stop the ice water flooding their veins. The joy of the moment was stained with the old, familiar fear. That night, as Min-Jun held her, his hand splayed over her rounded belly, he felt the baby kick strongly, a promise of life. But his eyes, in the dark, were fixed on the window, scanning the peaceful Lagos night for enemies seen and unseen. The battle for peace was eternal. And now it was for 3. The specialist from Seoul flew in. The shadow was confirmed as a harmless, fluid-filled cyst that would likely resolve before birth. The relief was a tidal wave that left them both weeping and laughing, clinging to each other. The moment crystallized their truth. There would always be shadows. Scans with ambiguous results, cryptic threats from the dark, the ghosts of past wars. But their weapon was not more darkness. It was light. It was the life they built, brick by brick, child by child, clinic by clinic. The house was built. They named it Iganile, House of Healing in Yoruba. Their son was born there, under that roof, not in a sterile hospital. He had his mother's bright eyes and his father's solemn, observant gaze. They named him Chijiok Min-Jun Adebayo Kim. The Serpent faction made one last, desperate attempt, a cyber attack aimed at discrediting the center's research. It was foiled by a joint Nigerian-Korean security team Amara had helped design. The perpetrators were caught, tried, and imprisoned. The victory was quiet, legal and final. Years later, Amara stood on the balcony of Igun Isle, watching Min-Jun teach their 5-year-old son how to fly a kite on the grounds of the thriving rehabilitation center. The legacy was no longer a building. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of healing, family, and love. The dragon's fire had not been extinguished. It had been transformed. It warmed their home, powered their generators, and lit the way for others lost in the dark. The war was over. But the vigilance, the fierce protection of this precious piece, was a forever commitment, and they would uphold it together. And so, dear viewers, the saga of the dragon and the phoenix finds its rhythm not in an ending, but in a beautiful, ongoing beginning. From a contract forged in deception to a union built on unbreakable truth, Amara and Min-Jun taught us that the greatest strength is not in never being broken, but in having the courage to be put back together, piece by the right hands. Their love became a fortress, a clinic, a home, a legacy. But the world holds many shadows, and light must always be vigilant. If you want to witness how they guard their hard-won peace, how little Chijioke grows under the sun of two cultures, and what new challenges and joys await this formidable family, your front row seat is right here. Do not miss a moment of their continuing story. Smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell with all your might. Every click tells us you believe in their love, and ensures you'll be the first to know when the next chapter of healing, drama, and unwavering devotion unfolds. This is not the end. It's just the beginning of their forever. Subscribe now.